That problem is far more common than many of us realize. Again and again, people quietly admit, my son, my daughter, someone I love. Addiction, pressure, and collapse don't discriminate. They reach into families of every background, even those that seem untouchable from the outside. Rock stardom, for all its glamour, doesn't always survive the spotlight. Yet the Bon Jovi family managed something few expected. While the world watched Jon Bon Jovi sell out stadiums and define an era, his children were quietly building lives of their own. By 2026, they are no longer simply the singer's kids. They are entrepreneurs, creatives, and modern figures, shaping a next-generation legacy no one saw coming. Stephanie Rose Bon Jovi, the firstborn of rock icon Jon Bon Jovi and his high school sweetheart Dorothea Hurley, who was born on May 31, 1993, in New Jersey. From the very beginning, she was a profound source of joy for her father, who has often described becoming a parent as a life-altering experience. Stephanie's arrival marked a new chapter in his life, inspiring not only personal growth, but also his music. The love he felt for his daughter was immortalized in song as she became the muse behind I've Got the Girl, a track that captures the universal emotion of a father cherishing his little girl and imagining her future. Their bond has long been marked by tenderness and shared moments. One of the most memorable public glimpses came when Stephanie was just 7 years old, dancing on stage with her father during a performance of that very song. It was a moment that revealed the human side of a global rock star. Years later, in February 2017, Stephanie made a surprise appearance during one of his Las Vegas shows. Jon paused and told the crowd how quickly time passes, how little babies grow up before you realize it, how that song was written for a girl who was no longer so little. Fans witnessed an intimate father-daughter moment that few performers ever share, a reminder that behind the fame was a father cherishing milestones. Stephanie's journey into adulthood, however, was not without hardship. In 2012, while attending college, she was hospitalized following an apparent opioid overdose. The incident sent shockwaves through her family and the public, underscoring how struggles can affect anyone, regardless of privilege or fame. Jon Bon Jovi later spoke about the situation, emphasizing trust, resilience, and support, saying that you surround your children with help and love and move forward. His response reflected compassion rather than judgment, and the strength of family bonds in moments of crisis. After that period, Stephanie chose a path away from the spotlight, carving out her own identity behind the scenes. She worked as a camera operator on television productions, allowing her to explore storytelling while maintaining privacy. Though she avoids celebrity attention, she occasionally appears at major family events. One such moment came in February 2024 when she attended the MusiCares Person of the Year Gala alongside her parents, honoring her father's philanthropic work. It was a quiet but powerful reminder of her evolution from the little girl on stage to a poised woman supporting her family's legacy. Jessie Bon Jovi, the second child of Jon Bon Jovi and Dorothea Hurley, was born on February 19, 1995, in Los Angeles. Growing up surrounded by music, philanthropy, and celebrity could have defined him, but Jesse was determined early on to build something of his own. He displayed a strong work ethic and focus from childhood, traits that mirrored his father's dedication. Academically driven, he enrolled at the University of Notre Dame, studying political science and government, while also playing football for the Fighting Irish. The discipline and teamwork he learned on the field later became invaluable in business. April 2018, Jesse launched Hampton Water, a rose wine brand alongside his father. What began as a family venture quickly became a serious business success. Within months, Wine Spectator named it the best rose of Arlington. Jon Bon Jovi described the experience of working with his son as deeply meaningful, noting how Jesse thought strategically and independently. Jesse was never a figurehead. He led branding, operations, and partnerships, ensuring the wine earned credibility on its own. By 2025, Jon publicly praised Jesse's accomplishments, emphasizing that the business was entirely his son's achievement and expressing pride in how far he had come. Jesse's personal life also flourished. He proposed to his longtime girlfriend, Jessie Light, in July 2022 in East Hampton, a place meaningful to the family. The couple married on May 7, 2024. in Las Vegas at the same chapel where Jon and Dorothea were married in 1989, symbolizing continuity across generations. In November 2025, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Blair Lucy Bongiovi, marking a new chapter of fatherhood and family legacy for Jesse. Jacob Jake Hurley Bongiovi, the third child, was born on May 7, 2002 in Palm Beach, Florida. Growing up in New Jersey, he balanced a relatively normal upbringing with the realities of fame. He attended Pennington School and later enrolled at Syracuse University in 2020, known for his reserved nature. Jake has consistently chosen discretion over publicity. His relationship with actress Millie Bobby Brown, which began in 2021, was marked by quiet support rather than spectacle. He attended major events like the BAFTAs and film premieres. Beside her without seeking attention in April 2023, Jake proposed, and the couple married privately in May 2024 with only close family present. In August 2025, they announced the adoption of their first child, a baby girl, emphasizing peace, privacy, and intention in their approach to parenthood. Jake's life reflects careful balance: education, family, partnership, and personal boundaries, all navigated with maturity beyond his years. Romeo Jon Bon Jovi, the youngest of the four, was born on March 29, 2004 in New Jersey. As the baby of the family, he has remained the most private. Shielded from social media and constant exposure, Romeo has grown up largely away from public scrutiny. Occasional glimpses appear through family milestones and affectionate messages from his parents, but his upbringing has been intentionally grounded. Though he has attended extraordinary events, including Royal Galas and his father's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, those close to the family emphasize that his life has been balanced with normalcy. Being the youngest has allowed Romeo to observe his older siblings as they navigated careers, relationships, and parenthood. This distance from the spotlight has given him space to grow at his own pace. Jon and Dorothea have spoken openly about the bittersweet nature of watching their children grow up, looking forward to new freedoms while cherishing family time. For Romeo, adulthood represents possibility without pressure, privacy without isolation. Jon Bon Jovi's career itself remains one of the most enduring stories in modern rock. From the breakout success of Runaway in 1983 to the global dominance of Slippery When Wet in New Jersey, through reinvention in the 1990s and resurgence with its My Life in 2000, his longevity is rare. Beyond music, his philanthropy through the Jon Bon Jovi Soul Foundation has reinforced his image as an artist with purpose. Yet perhaps his most lasting legacy isn't measured in album sales or sold-out tours, but in the grounded, independent lives of his children. What makes the Bon Jovi family's story so striking isn't that the children avoided struggle, temptation, or pressure. It's that they were never sold as a fantasy. Jon and Dorothea didn't raise their kids as extensions of fame or accessories to success. They raised them with structure, accountability, and the freedom to choose lives that didn't have to orbit a stage, an industry where children of rock stars often burn out, rebel publicly, or disappear entirely. The Bon Jovi children grew into adulthood quietly, imperfectly, and with purpose. Stephanie's path shows resilience rather than reinvention for applause. Jesse's journey proves that legacy doesn't have to be inherited, it can be earned. Jake's life reflects intention and restraint in a world addicted to exposure. Romeo's privacy is perhaps the clearest statement of all, a reminder that not every legacy needs to be documented in real time. Together, they represent four very different responses to the same reality. Growing up in the shadow of a global icon, Jon Bon Jovi once said that success isn't measured by how many records you sell, but by who's still standing next to you when the noise fades. In that sense, his greatest achievement may not be a chart-topping anthem or a sold-out tour, but a family that remained intact, grounded, and evolving long after the spotlight dimmed. Fame came and stayed, but it never became the foundation of their identity. Rock royalty doesn't usually age this way. Fractures, implodes, or turns into myth. The Bon Jovi legacy did something rarer. It matured, and that maturity didn't happen by accident. It was built slowly, through choices made away from cameras and crowds. Jon and Dorothea famously stayed married in an industry where permanence is almost rebellious. That stability became the quiet framework their children grew up inside. There were rules, expectations, and consequences. Fame might have paid the bills, but it didn't run the household. Friends of the family have often noted that the Bon Jovi home felt surprisingly normal, more focused on school schedules, dinner, conversations, showing up than on celebrity privilege. That grounding shows up most clearly in how the children handle attention. None of them chase headlines. None of them rely on controversy. Even when their lives intersect with public moments, engagements, weddings, parenthood, business wins, they are shared selectively, almost cautiously. In a culture that rewards oversharing, restraint has become their signature. That restraint is not distance or coldness, but intention. They understand the cost of exposure because they grew up watching it firsthand. It's also telling that each child chose a different lane. Stephanie works behind the camera. Jesse builds brands. Jake supports rather than dominates. Romeo observes and waits. There is no single Bon Jovi child blueprint, no pressure to replicate their father's path. That freedom may be the most radical inheritance of all. Jon Bon Jovi gave his kids something rarer than access or influence. He gave them permission to be ordinary when they wanted to be, and ambitious only on their own terms. As the years move forward and Jon Bon Jovi himself shifts further into legacy status, the narrative subtly changes. The question is no longer how he balanced fame and family, but whether that balance outlasts him. So far, the answer appears to be yes. His children are not frozen in the shadow of a rock legend. They are walking forward, carrying the name without being consumed by it. In the end, the Bon Jovi story isn't just about survival in the spotlight. It's about what happens after. When the tour is slow, the crowd's thin, and the music becomes memory, what remains is family. Not perfect, not untouched by hardship, but intact. And in a world where rock stardom often leaves wreckage behind it. That may be the most unexpected legacy of all. Time will ultimately decide how the Bon Jovi legacy is remembered. But the early signs point toward evolution rather than repetition. None of the children appear interested in becoming carbon copies of their father. Instead, they reflect the changing nature of modern celebrity itself. Influence now grows through entrepreneurship, quiet creativity, and carefully managed privacy. Rather than relentless public exposure, in many ways, the next generation represents a softer, more intentional version of fame, one that values sustainability over spectacle, as Jon Bon Jovi moves further into the role of elder statesman within the music world. His presence shifts from center stage to mentorship and reflection. Interviews in recent years show a man more focused on family dinners and philanthropic impact than chart positions. Watching his children build independent lives seems to bring him a different kind of pride than platinum records ever could. Their achievements aren't extensions of his career. They are confirmations that his values carried forward. The public, meanwhile, continues to watch with curiosity. Fans who once screamed along to arena anthems now find themselves following stories about business launches, private weddings, adoptions, and family milestones. It's a quieter form of fascination, less about celebrity chaos and more about stability. That shift mirrors the audience itself, many of whom have grown older alongside the band and now appreciate stories of longevity and grounded success. There is also an unspoken message in the way the family navigates mistakes and challenges. They never pretend that life is flawless. They acknowledge hardship, step back when necessary, and return stronger but more private. That cycle of struggle, healing, and growth feels authentic in a world saturated with carefully manufactured perfection. It reminds people that resilience is not a performance but a process. Looking ahead, the next chapter of the Bon Jovi family will likely be written in subtle moments rather than dramatic headlines. New businesses may emerge, creative projects may surface quietly. Children will grow into parents and parents into grandparents. The legacy may expand not through louder achievements but through consistency, humility, and the steady passing of values from one generation to the next. And perhaps that is the real transformation of rock royalty in the modern age. It no longer ends with a final tour or a greatest hits album. It continues through families that evolve beyond the stage, carrying forward lessons learned in the glare of fame while building lives that feel genuine and self-defined. The Bon Jovi story shows That legacy is not just about the past or even the present. It is about what endures when the music fades and ordinary life, with all its quiet victories, becomes the loudest applause of all. And perhaps that is what resonates most deeply with audiences now. In an era fascinated by collapse stories and scandal arcs, the Bon Jovi family offers something quieter but far more difficult to achieve: continuity. There is no dramatic implosion to dissect, no public estrangement to speculate over, no cautionary tale wrapped in excess. Instead, there is evolution, imperfect human evolution. Jon Bon Jovi once built songs around big emotions meant for arenas: hope, struggle, loyalty, survival. Those same themes appear almost unnoticed in the lives of his children, not his lyrics, but his lived experience. They face pressure without imploding, opportunity without entitlement, and hardship without spectacle. That didn't make headlines, but it built something sturdier than fame as the public shifts its attention toward the next wave of stars. The Bon Jovi name is no longer just tied to the past, it's carried forward in quieter ways: a business deal signed without fanfare, a child raised out of the spotlight, a marriage protected from public consumption, a career chosen because it fits, not because it trends. This is what legacy looks like when it's allowed to breathe in the end. The most surprising part of the Bon Jovi story isn't that the music lasted, it's that the family did. Long after the final encore, when the lights are down and the crowd has gone home, what remains is not noise or myth, but people. And that may be the truest measure of success there is. And if there's a final lesson embedded in the Bon Jovi family story, it's this: fame doesn't have to be the loudest thing in the room. It can exist, loom large even, without consuming everything around it. Jon Bon Jovi stood at the center of a global phenomenon for decades, yet somehow managed to step aside when it mattered most, allowing his children the space to grow without scripts written for them in advance. That choice reshaped the outcome. Instead of becoming characters in a celebrity narrative, the Bon Jovi children became decision-makers in their own lives. They learned early that attention is fleeting, but character lasts. That lesson shows up in how they handle success, how they guard privacy, how they define achievement on their own terms rather than inherited expectations. As time moves forward, the Bon Jovi name will inevitably shift in meaning. For older fans, it will always echo through stadia anthems and memories of youth. For a newer generation, it may represent something different entirely: a model of longevity, balance, and restraint in a world that rewards excess. The children won't replace the legend, nor do they need to. They extend it sideways into business, creativity, family, and quiet influence. Not every legacy needs a sequel on stage. Some unfold in living rooms, boardrooms, classrooms, and moments no camera ever sees. The Bon Jovi family chose that path. And in doing so, they proved that survival in the spotlight is impressive, but building a life beyond it is the real victory. And that victory doesn't announce itself with applause. It shows up years later in the absence of regret, in relationships that hold, and in children who don't need to escape the past to survive the future. A Bon Jovi family didn't reject fame, but they never worshipped it either, treated it as a circumstance, not an identity. That distinction made all the difference in many ways. Jon Bon Jovi's children represent a counter-narrative to what the public expects from rock royalty. They didn't self-destruct. They didn't rebel for attention. They didn't monetize chaos. Instead, they normalized something radical: stability. And stability, especially in a world fueled by spectacle, is quietly revolutionary. As Jon Bon Jovi himself ages into legacy status, the image of him as a frontman slowly gives way to something more enduring. Not just the voice of a generation, but the architect of a life that didn't collapse under its own weight. His children are living proof that success doesn't have to come at the cost of family, and that ambition doesn't require sacrifice of values. So when the final chapters of the Bon Jovi story are eventually written, they may not focus on chart positions or ticket sales. They may focus on something far rarer. A man who stood at the peak of fame and chose, again and again, to come home. A family that learned how to live with the noise without letting it define them. And a legacy that didn't burn out but carried on quietly, steadily, and intact.